And for today's 3-card reading, we find one, excuse me, that involves some of the more difficult cards, or the more challenging cards for people. 2 of the face or court cards. These can get challenging for folks in a couple of ways. One, they don't follow the typical numerological progression of the tarot. And 2, they have different names in different decks, and different people want to say how to designate them and which correlates to which between different decks, and that can make it a little difficult. So I'd like to discuss both in brief, and hopefully in the near future I can do a video on the court cards. But first, I'll say I borrow, as far as the progression and where they fall in the suits, I borrow from both Aleister Crowley and Alejandro Jodorowsky, who ironically doesn't care much for Mr. Crowley, at least the last I read. So, in the minor arcana, the suits, the 4 suits, outside of the major arcana cards that we have probably a greater familiar with through pop culture, such as the devil, the fool, the magician, the moon, the star, death. Forget about those for this discussion. Now we talk about the suits, the minor arcana, where we have cups, pentacles or pentagrams or coins or discs, depending on the deck, as well as wands and swords. And typically, pretty much in any standard tarot I've seen, each suit has some numbered cards running from ace or 1 all the way to 10. But then they each have 4 other cards, known as, I mentioned before, the court or face cards, because they involve specifically individual people, male and female. Now, I choose to view the tarot, the minor suits, as Alejandro Jodorowsky does, where we have pairs, 4 pairs of cards framed by the ace down at the bottom and the 10 up at the top. So that leaves us with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And between those pairs lie the court cards. They act as stepping stones. They can also represent people in your life. Usually of the gender associated with the figure in the card. And of course we know that's gotten to become a very interesting topic. So I'll leave that for another time, maybe. But it does lend itself to questions of the born gender of the person, the identified gender of the person. If it it can just get confusing if we get into those waters, so we won't right now. But the natural next question involves their progression. What sits between the 2 and the 3, and the 6 and the 7, and the others? In decks that follow the Rider-Waite and the Tarot de Marseille traditions, we have the court cards named Page, Queen, King, and Knight. I put the Knight at the end as the highest, as the most mobile, in agreement with Aleister Crowley. But in other decks, such as the one I use probably most frequently on this channel, not the Santa Muerte, but the Black Flame Tarot, we have princes, princesses, queens, and knights. So we have the queen and the knight in common in that layout, and that also holds true in the Thoth Tarot by Crowley. I prefer to just put them in a simple ascending order as well. Others deliberately correlate them differently. In cases of those decks, I prefer, just like Page, Queen, King, Knight, I prefer Prince, Princess, Queen, Knight. So in that layout, the Queen would correlate with the King of other traditions, the Prince with the Page, the Princess with the Queen, and the Knight, of course, with the Knight. I'll do a video on that at some point in the relatively near future, because it probably will help if you can actually see what I mean. With that said, let's take a look at this reading today, where we have the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Pentacles. According to some, this would mean we have a strong feminine figure in the relationship aspect of our lives. Look at that. She wants to give you her heart, right? Or she wants to take yours. Depends on how you want to look at it. And we have a strong feminine character in the pentacle aspect of your life, or the environmental earth element aspect of your life. These could refer to the same person. They could refer to different competing women. Or they could refer to aspects of yourself, in which case we find both of them sitting between the, between the 6s and 7s, where we go from passionate pursuit of our interests and abilities and goals and aims, and doing so with purpose. As they stand between those things in these respective spheres, we have to ask ourselves, do they act as stepping stones where we find ourselves propelling into that new phase, or do they act as comfort zones that we have to break away from? If we want to look at it from that standpoint, so that we can keep moving, think of the overprotective mom who doesn't want to let us cut the cord, so to speak, wants to hold us there. In our journey of life, and becoming ourselves, and working on these aspects of ourselves, our relationships with others and ourselves, and our ability to transform our environment to things fitting ourselves, we can't give in to hindrances. I would say that perhaps this relates more to the latter interpretation, where we find ourselves somewhat stuck, a little less mobile than we'd like. So what do? We approach the swords. The Two of Swords has to do with us becoming aware of ourselves as our own intellectual beings, capable of doing our own thing, for lack of a better phrase. And what do we do if we have cords binding us, or we haven't cut the cord from an overbearing or overprotective person, probably of the female gender. We have to cut it. If we want to move forward, we have to cut it. That can get painful. If you find yourself watching this video, I assume that you've been around for a few years, and this has been a situation for a while. It's become ingrained, cemented. The time has come to cut it. Now, that doesn't mean cutting them out of your life. It means setting boundaries. It means setting new expectations. It means standing up for yourself in ways that you probably haven't before. But where will you go if you don't? In the numerological approach, getting from the 6 to the 7 can mean a world of difference. Entirely different phase of your development and transformation. If you stay stagnant, if you don't climb that ladder, what will become of you? Your ambitions, your hopes and dreams. Setting boundaries and new expectations and understandings comes as one of the more painful and difficult for most of us aspects of becoming one's true and more refined self. But it comes as a necessary rung on this ladder. It will demonstrate your ability to transform things, to transform environments. In this case, the nature of the environment of your relationships. Do it for your own well-being. Have a heart. Do it considerately. Do it compassionately, unless it really needs to involve cutting someone abusive or harmful out of your life. In that case, just get to cutting. But, in a procedure, they often use anesthetic. Choose your words carefully. Don't burn any bridges unnecessarily, but do what you need to do to become you. As always, I invite you to check out my links to my other more regularly updated platforms, the Facebook and the Instagram. Follow me there and subscribe for more regular updates as those occur here. Hope you've learned something today. You may not agree with my court card interpretation, but I may not agree with yours. We can learn from one another about this or other aspects of the reading. Please feel free and encouraged to leave comments, thoughts, remarks in the comments section below. I do like to respond to those. I do like to have discussion, so please take a few minutes to do that and share my stuff. I should soon have better audio equipment, so it'll make it a little easier to hear, and I certainly look forward to that. Until then, folks and friends, have a beautiful day and keep transforming.